Today we're looking at what is the connection between ratios, fractions, and percents. So really just being able to see that relationship and convert between fractions and percents. So the first thing we're going to do is I have three diagrams here. These are 10 by 10 grids. So there's 100 squares in each of them. First thing we want to do is write the fraction of the squares that are shaded. So in letter A, I have 3 rows of 10. So that's 30 squares out of 100. Letter B, 2 rows of 10, so there's 20 squares out of 100. And in the last one, I have 5 by 5 down here, so I have 25 squares shaded out of 100. So those are the fractions. The next part is to write the ratio of the number of shaded squares to the total number of squares. So compare shaded to total number. So here I have 30 to 100 total. Okay. Letter B, there's 20 shaded to 100 total. And in letter C, there's 25 shaded to 100 total. So when we look at how are the ratios and the fractions related, well, we can see that the parts of the ratios, like 30 and 100, correspond to the numerators and denominators of the fractions. So we talked before about how ratios can be written with the word to or with a colon or even as a fraction. So really we can see that ratios and fractions, they have that same relationship. We're going to compare that to percents now as well. So when we talk about the word percent, this is one of our vocabulary words. Okay, the word percent. We know that we have the word century, that means 100 years. We have a cent, the coin, that's 1/100 of a dollar if you have 100 pennies. And then in Mexico, you have what's called a centavo, which is 1/100 of a peso. So that cent, that means 100. So if we have the word percent, that just means per 100. So the symbol for percent we've seen before. It's like this little slash, little dots on either side. So now let's think about percents. What percent of each diagram above is shaded? So in letter A, per 100, well, I have 30 squares shaded per 100. So that's 30%. Letter B, there's 20 squares shaded per 100. That's 20%. And in letter C, 25 squares shaded per 100. That's going to be 25%. Okay, so in this next part, we have 3 diagrams again. First, we want to figure out what percent of each diagram is shaded. Then we're going to write that as a percent. We're going to take each percent and then write it as a fraction, but in simplest form. So if we look at letter A, I have 60 squares shaded, which means I have 60%. Okay. So as a fraction, that means I have 60 squares shaded out of 100. I can simplify that by dividing both of those by 20, so it becomes 3/5. Go ahead and pause your video and try letters B and C. Okay, go ahead and check your work there. All right, let's move on down here. So now we're going to look at how we can see that fractions, percents, the simplified version, they all have that same model or visual. So for example, letter A, we have 2/5. So I have a diagram that has 5 equal pieces. I'm going to shade in 2 of them. Okay. If I shade in the same amount of space on this diagram, okay, I'm going to get my equivalent fraction. I know to get from 5 to 100, I multiply it by 20. So I'm going to do the same thing up here. 2 times 20, I get 40. So if I shade in 40 squares, that's the same amount of space I have here. When you're getting these equivalent fractions, keep in mind this is just like the ratio table. The only difference is I don't have the table around it. I don't have that T-chart. There's no border. But that's exactly what we were doing with ratio tables. Okay, so this is 40%, and 40 per 100 again, it's going to show the same diagram there. Okay, so now I want you to take these fractions and write them as percents. So to do that, 7/10, you want to rewrite it so that it's a fraction with 100 on the bottom. So I know 10 times 10 is 100, 7 times 10 is 70. So my percent is 70%. Go ahead and pause your video, try the next three, and then you can unpause to check your work. All right, letter C, I got 60%. Letter D was 75%, and 12% for letter E. Okay, now we're going to more formally look at writing a percent as a fraction. We know a percent is just a ratio where the whole is always 100. That is never going to change. So you can always just put your denominator as 100. Always go there because a percent means per 100. So if we start with the percent, here's 35%, here's our visual. That's 35 squares out of 100. So I'm going to take 35 and place it over 100. But then I need to simplify. Okay? So I did write over here, if you want to pause your video and write this down, this is just kind of user-friendly directions to follow every single time. You just write it as a fraction with a denominator of 100, then simplify. Always start with the denominator of 100 because it's per 100. So now I'm going to simplify this. I'm going to divide each of these by 5. So 35 divided by 5, I end up with 7. And 100 divided by 5, I end up with 20. 7/20. The next one, I have 100%. Well, if I take 100 and I put it over 100, that's just one whole. And you can see we have the entire thing shaded. That's one whole. All right, the next one is a mixed number. We have 174%. So if you think about 174%, that's more than 100%. We know it's going to be a mixed number then because it's more than the one whole. Just like when you have a mixed number, it's more than one whole. So there's two different ways to do this. I'll show you both. So the first way is just to take 174% and place it over 100. Okay? Then I can simplify it. I'm going to divide those both by 2. So I get 87 over 50. Then that has to become a mixed number. So 50 goes into 87 one time, and I'm going to have 37 left over. So I just followed the same procedure that I did with the other two. I just put 174 over 100. Another option is to just kind of jump right into the mixed number. I know that this 100% is one whole, so I can start with that. But then I have these 87 boxes here. Oh, I'm sorry, not 87. 74 boxes here. 87 was what we got up here. These are 74 boxes shaded out of 100. So I can do 74 over 100. That's my one whole, and then the 74 I have left over 100. Then I can just simplify that, keep my 1, and divide these both by 2 to get the 37 over 50. Okay, there are 4 down here at the bottom I want you to try. One of them will be a mixed number. So you're going to put them all over 100 and then simplify if you can. So pause your video, give those a try on your own. Once you work through them by yourself, go ahead and unpause to check your work. Okay, number 1, I got 1 over 20. Number 2, 1 and 17/25. Number 3, I divided both by 4 to get 9 over 25. And number 4, I just put it over 100, and they don't have any common factors, so I just left it as 83 over 100. Okay, the last example we're going to look at is more formally looking at taking a fraction and writing as a percent. So we just took percents and wrote them as fractions. We're just going to go the other way now. So we always just write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100, and then we know once we get to that point, your numerator is your percent. So, for example, I have 3/50. So I want to create an equivalent fraction that has 100 on the bottom. Again, this is just like what you were doing with the ratio tables, but there's no table around it. These are just like the equivalent fractions you created in 4th grade, 5th grade. Okay, but then we're going to look at how that's related to percents. So I know to get from 50 to 100, I'm going to have to multiply by 2. So then I'm going to go up to the 3 and multiply by 2 as well. So 3 times 2 is 6, which means my percent is 6%. All right, go ahead, pause your video. Try 5, 6, 7, and 8 on your own, getting a denominator of 100, and then write the percent. Unpause when you're ready so you can check your work. Okay, number 5, I put that over 100 and I got 62%. Number 6, multiplying by 4, I got 28%. Number 7, 95%. And number 8, 150%. So I changed 1 1/2 to 3/2 and got 150 over 100. You could also think you know that 1 is going to be the 100%. So figure out what percent is 1/2 and then add those together. All right, go ahead and head to Big Ideas Math. You have a homework assignment there, so use these notes and examples to help you complete that.